Today's daf we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf Yud Gimel. Today's daf we're going to be continuing the discussion of the intercalating of the year and finish up that topic and move on to the next. But first we're going to have a long discussion about which date. If you remember when we determine about intercalating the year, one of the three considerations we consider is the tkufa, when the equinox happens and how that affects the holidays. So both it connects with Pesach and it connects with Sukkot, and we're going to have a number of different opinions about this. You can see there was a big issue they grappled with. And there's going to be a bit of confusion about some of the opinions. So I'll warn you that today is one of those complicated days that you might walk out feeling like I might not have gotten everything, but I'll try to give you the broad overview and we'll try to get through the details as well. So starting from the bottom of your bet, Amud Bet. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. In ma'abrin et hashana, elen keneta tkufa chasera ruba shel chodesh. Okay, there's a very complicated language to explain. We do not, okay, there's a lot of double negatives, which also makes it complicated. We do not intercalate the year, add another month, unless the tkufa was missing the majority of the month. Okay, this is a little bit confusing. And then we're going to get to what is the majority of the month. But what they're basically saying, in other words, is okay, when do we decide to intercalate the year? If it is still summer, meaning we haven't hit September 22nd yet, which is, okay, now we're going to see. September 22nd, some people think is the first day of the winter season, autumn. Some people think it's the last day of summer. So we're going to also have to talk about that. But right now, we're not really dealing with that issue per se yet. But when do we decide to intercalate the year? Okay, we do it when the tkufa, we haven't gotten through the majority of Tishrei. We've gotten through the majority of Tishrei and it's still summer. Okay, that's really what we want. We want to make sure that when we hit the majority of Tishrei, we're already in the next season. It's already autumn. That's the issue. Now, what is the majority of the month that decides that if we hit the holiday of Sukkot, and we're going to see which day of Sukkot, but one of the days of Sukkot, and it's still summer, we're going to have to make a new year, leap year, because we don't want either part or all or some. Okay, we're going to see what percentage of Sukkot to come out during the summer. So we have to push off and intercalate the year. How much is this? Shisha Asar Yom Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. 16 days. Okay, so what that means is if the 16th day of Tishrei comes out on the equinox, then we're good to go. Then we don't have to intercalate the year. Okay, so as long as the majority of the month has passed and it's now, and by the time we reach autumn, then we're good. Okay, but if the majority of the month has passed and we're still in summer, we have a problem. Rabbi Yossi says 21 days. Now, why 21 daes? Now, he thinks as long as we have the last day of Sukkot, the 21st day of Tishrei, remember, Shmini Atzeret is a separate holiday. As long as we have the last day of Sukkot in the new season, we're okay. So meaning we're only going to intercalate the year if the 21st has come and it's still summer. They both learn it from the same pasuk. Chag ha'asif tkufat hashana. So what does it say? The holiday for gathering is the tkufat hashana. Okay, so we're going to explain what this means. Mar savar kule chag be'ina b'tkufa chadasha. In other words, the chag ha'asif happens in the new season, in the winter season. So now, one holds you need the entire holiday. Now, this is a little strange because the entire holiday would be the 15th, not the 16th. So why is 16 the cutoff? Because when do you gather? You gather on Chol HaMoed. So we're only talking from the first day of Chol HaMoed, second day of Sukkot. So as long as the second day of Sukkot, which is on the 16th of Tishrei, is in the new season, and that you need the 16th and the rest of the holiday also from the 16th on to be in the new season. That's the first opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Umar savar mixat chag be'ina b'tkufa chadasha. When it says chag asif tkufat hashana, as long as one day of the holiday is in the new season, you're good to go. So, my kasavre. So now they say, wait a minute. But what do they hold exactly? Because kasavre, now we're going to get back to what I mentioned before, which we didn't see inside yet, which is the day of the equinox, September 22nd. Is that the first day of fall or is it the last day of summer? So, kasavre yom tkufa gomer belav hachinami. If you say the equinox is still the last day of the previous season, then it doesn't matter if the 16th is on the equinox or the 21st is on the equinox. Either opinion is going to have a problem with that because if you hold it's the 16th or if you hold it's the 21st, that day falls on September 22nd, right? The second day of Sukkot is September 22nd, the last day of Sukkot is September 22nd. So according to both opinions, you don't need to intercalate the year, right? The only time you do it is it's if the 16th happens, right? If the 16th is still in summer. Now, if you say, so again, not if you say kule chag, not if you say miksa chag, if the 16th or the 21st falls on the day of the tkufa and you think the day of the tkufa is the last day, then either which way, you're going to have to intercalate the year because it's still, right, whether you hold 16th, whether you hold 21st, it's still summer. Ela kasavre Yom Tkufa matchil. They must think that Yom Tkufa starts because they both think that if the 16th falls or the 21st falls, it doesn't matter which one, on the day of the equinox, you're okay. You only need to intercalate the year if it's not yet the equinox, okay, when it's the 16th or when it's the 21st. So therefore, it seems like they must both hold that Yom Tkufa is the day of the equinox is already the first day of fall. But Meitive, okay, and that's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi who we just saw, because that's not their debate. However, we have a problem because Tannaitic source says Meitive. Meitive is a difficulty on something we just explained, right? What the Gemara just explained here, which is Shmuel. Shmuel said, and then he said, and Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi debate this issue. But Yom Tkufa Gomer divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Amar Yom Tkufa Matchil. That doesn't make any sense because we see here that issue is a machloka between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. And basically we have a problem with Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda said the day of the equinox is the last day of the previous season. So he can't possibly say that, right? Again, he disagrees with Rabbi Yossi about the issue, is it 16 or is it 21? But they both seem to agree that if that day is the equinox, there's no need to do Ibor Shana. But why not? If he thinks that day is the last day of the previous season, and you need from the 16th forward to be part of the new season, then you have a problem because the 16th is on the equinox and the equinox is the previous season. So Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make sense. And another problem we have with Shmuel, the Od Tanya, it says in a braita, and now we're going to have this long, complicated braita that we're going to spend a lot of today explaining part by part. So don't worry that you're not going to really understand it all right now. But I want you to focus particularly while we're reading this source on Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. And it might be helpful to just remind you, Rabbi Yehuda says 16, Rabbi Yossi says 21. So again, this is the complicated part. It's a very complicated braita, hard to understand each part. Even the Gemara struggled to understand the different parts of this braita. The Od Tanya, it says in a braita, and in this braita we're going to have 5 different opinions. So this sounds exactly like Rabbi Yehuda said according to Shmuel, that Rubo shel Chodesh is 16 days. The problem is that the next line is Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and here comes Rabbi Yehuda who said 16 days according to Shmuel, Shtei Yadot b'Chodesh, 2/3 of the month is Rubo shel Chodesh. Rubo doesn't mean half, majority, beyond the half point. It means 2/3. Kama shtei yadot b'chodesh, 20 yom. And what does that take you to? 20 days. So notice Rabbi Yehuda says 20 days, which is very similar to Rabbi Yossi's 21 days. Okay, but this is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer Mechashrin. Now here comes the most complicated line today, or at least one of the complicated lines of the braita. We evaluate. Shisha asar lefnei Pesach ma'abri. He all of a sudden brings in Pesach, which we weren't discussing until now. If you've gotten to the 16th of the month of Pesach, and you're already you're still in summer, you're still in winter, you haven't hit spring yet, then ma'abrin, okay? If the 16th comes out on the equinox, then you have to be ma'aber shana, okay? Then already Pesach, right, doesn't come out in the spring. Okay, now 16, and we're going to talk about what this 16 days, because 16 days we're going to see later comes out to, and there's a bit of a deliberation about this, but if the 16th day of Pesach happens on the equinox, then when you get to, and by the way, this is doing the same thing with using Chol HaMoed specifically. When you get to Sukkot, the 21st is going to be on the equinox. Okay, that's what that's what we're going to see later, but you don't really need to know this yet. Okay, then they tell you that's Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi continues and says, but Shishasa lifnei Chag ein ma'abrin. But if the 16th comes out on the equinox in the autumn, the 16th of Tishrei, then you don't have to do Ibor. In other words, as long as the 16th is already in the new season, you're good. Whereas if the 16th is in the equinox on Pesach, you're going to have to push it off. Okay, this whole opinion is very confusing. We're going to leave it when we get to it later. But again, I want to point out that what does Rabbi Yossi say? 16 is a day that determines that you don't need to do Ibor on if the 16th falls on the equinox, then you're good and you don't need to do Ibor in the autumn. What did Rabbi Yossi say before about Tishrei? 21 days. This is a little bit confusing. Rabbi Shimon, so leave this aside, we'll come back to Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says even the 16th before the Chag, in other words, it sounds like he's disagreeing with this thing about what Rabbi Yossi just said, even though theoretically it sounds like he's saying the same thing as Tannaim. We'll come back to this later because Tannaim also said 16. He said if the 16th comes out right before Chag, meaning even before Pesach, the 16th is still in the previous season, right? Then ma'abrin. Okay, you need to push things off. Okay, if the 16th doesn't come out in the fall, then you have to push off the month. Achirim omrim miuto. Others say the minority of the month. In other words, until now we've been saying if the month is chaser, ma'abrin shana, unless the tkufa was chaser rubo shel chodesh. Now we're going to say, no, we're going to have to be ma'aber even if it's missing miuto shel chodesh, meaning if we're, let's say, around the 14th day or something, and we're still in summer, we have a problem. Even the 14th of Tishrei, it sounds like they're saying, because that's what we're going to say right now, kama miuto, what is a minority? Arba'asar yom. Okay, so even if we're around 14th, 15th, and we're still in the summer, we have a problem and we have to push it off. Okay, with all these opinions, I just want to point out, it's not exactly clear, and the commentaries differ, whether it means this day is on the day of the equinox, or this day is, before the equinox, but the next day is on the equinox. It's not exactly clear, particularly which day, but it's important to have in mind these concepts. Is it 16? Is it 22? That, if you've gone through 22, by the way, shows this was the 16th of Nisan, basically meaning parallel that comes out to the 22nd of Tishrei, means the entire Sukkot then is going to be in the summer. That's definitely a problem, but any less sounds like it's okay. So again, is the 16th the determining date, the 21st? Is it the 14th, 15th, right? We have different dates. And again, a little bit confusing exactly. Does that mean this day is the day of the equinox? This day is past the equinox? Okay, which one it has to be, whether the equinox is Gomer or Matchil, whether it finishes the season before. Let's not get hung up on all those details because, like I said, there's multiple ranges of opinions here. But if we run through these opinions, we have Tannaim says 16, Rabbi Yehuda says 20. Rabbi Yossi says, again, a little bit confusing, Tet Zayin Nisan happens in the winter, you've got to push off Pesach. But 16th of Tishrei happens in the autumn, you're fine, you're good. Okay, you don't push off. Rabbi Shimon then says 16, like Tannaim, and Achirim seem to say this 14 days, which basically sounds like from day 15, which means all of Chag Sukkot, it has to be fall. But we'll talk about this opinion later, because also we're going to have different ways to understand. Why did we bring all this very complicated braita before we go in and try to understand each part of the braita? Well, kasha, this raises a difficulty, and the Gemara doesn't provide an answer, because the real difficulty is that Shmuel said, what is Rubo Shel Chodesh, or the Stam of the Gemara said it. We don't really know if it was a continuation of Shmuel's statement, because Shmuel just said, unless the tkufa was Chasera Ruba Shel Chodesh, right? We don't have to do Ibor unless that, right? We haven't gotten to half the month and it's still, right? We got to half the month and it's still summer. How much is Ruba Shel Chodesh? 16 days according to Rabbi Yehuda, 21 days according to Rabbi Yossi. And in our braita, we say 20 days according to Rabbi Yehuda and 16 according to Rabbi Yossi. So we have to figure this out. And well, the truth is we're not going to figure it out. We raise this as a difficulty and we have a problem. So we had two issues. One was that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi don't seem to be arguing according to this statement of Shmuel or explanation of the statement of Shmuel. They don't seem to be arguing about whether Yom Tekufa Gomer and Yom Tekufa Matchil, the exact day of the equinox, is it last day of summer, first day of autumn, but it says in a braita that they do disagree. So that's question number one against Shmuel, and their opinions seem to be reversed in this other braita that we quoted. So now, this very confusing braita, we're going to start going one by one and start understanding it better. Amar Mar. So Amar Mar, we're going back to a statement made in the braita. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shtei yadot b'chodesh 20 yom. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Mechashvim 16 yom lefnei Pesach ma'abrim, to which they say, Hainu Rabbi Yehuda. So the first problem with this machloket Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda is that if you say we figure out 16 yom lefnei Pesach ma'abrim, that basically gets you to 22 days. That 16th day of Nisan. The reason why it's important is really not because of Pesach, or even if it is, but it sounds like it's important because what it's telling you is if the 16th of Nisan happens and it's still winter, it hasn't gotten to be spring yet, then you have to be Ma'abel Shana, because then you're going to end up with Sukkot. The last day of the day after Sukkot, the 22nd, is going to be the first day of autumn, and you're going to end up with all of Sukkot happening. The Chag Asif, which has to be T'kufat Shana, in the new season, doesn't happen in the new season. And that's really the same as Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says 20 days. Now, what does it really mean? 20 days seems to mean if the day after, if the equinox, let's say Rabbi Yehuda holds, if you remember, Yom Tkufa Gomer. So if the equinox is on day 21, that means Sukkot, the last day of Sukkot is day 20. I'm sorry, if the equinox is on 20, which is what Rabbi Yehuda says, that means the last day of Sukkot is 21. That's going to happen in the new season. That's okay. But anything, right? If the 21st happens in summer still, we have a problem. That's really the same as what Rabbi Yossi is saying. If the 21st happens in the summer, we have a problem because, right, if the 22nd happens on the equinox, we have a problem because all of Sukkot happened. And they're basically saying, again, to say it in very simplified terms so you don't get too confused with all these numbers, what it means is both think that one day of Sukkot, however you do the counting, because they each have different ways of counting, and whether the equinox, September 22nd, is first day, last day. Okay, but the main point is one day of Sukkot has to be in the autumn. That's the same opinion. So how do we explain this? Yom Tkufa Gomer v'Yom Tkufa Matril Ika Beinayu. Their machloket is exactly about this point, whether it's true. They differ by one day. It's two different opinions because they differ by one day. But Rabbi Yehuda thinks the equinox can fall on, right, if the equinox falls on the 20th, then you're okay because the 21st will be your first day. And Rabbi Yossi says the equinox can even be on the 21st because the 21st is already the first day of the new season. Amar Mar. Now we really have to understand, though, this confusing Rabbi Yossi opinion because there's actually a contradiction in what Rabbi Yossi said. Amar Mar, Shishasar lefnei Chag ein ma'abrim. Remember, the second part of Rabbi Yossi was if the 16th comes out, right, it sounds like you need the 16th to already be in the new season, right? Shishasar lefnei Chag ein ma'abrim. Then you don't have to do Ibor. If the 16th is in the new season, there's no point to do Ibor. But Ela Rabbi Yossi, Shishasar lefnei Chag hu delo, hashivsar v'timnisar ma'abrim. It sounds like if Shishasar happens, right, in the new season, then you're good. But if it's only the 17th or the 18th or the 19th that happens in the new season, and the 16th is still in the previous season, it sounds like in this second line that Rabbi Yossi says in this braita, he thinks that when the 16th, meaning second day of Sukkot, is still in the summer, and that means the 17th or the 18th or the 19th, happens on the equinox, then it sounds like Ma'abrim, because he says only in the 16th low Ma'abrim, which sounds like 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, you would have to be Ma'abel. But in the first line he said, it's not the 16th, it's the determining day here, that you need all of Chol Hamoed Sukkot to be in the autumn. He specifically said 16th of Nisan has to be in the spring in order that the 22nd, right, not be the first day of fall. So, sounds like there, you don't need any more than one day of Sukkot to be in. Why does it sound like he's saying in the second line? The first line seems to say, again, assuming that we're bringing in Pesach in order to get to Tishrei, and if the 16th falls out there, then the 22nd will be the the equinox in Tishrei, then there again, I want to get away from the numbers because I find them confusing. But if the 20 there, it seems to determine that the 22nd is the important day because you want to make sure at least one day of Pesach happens in Sukkot happens in the autumn, just one day. But the second line seems to imply all the days starting from the second day of Sukkot have to be in the autumn. So those are two different approaches, but they're all said by the same person. So, lo, idi v'idi ema abri. Now, really, if the 17th, 18th, or 19th, as long as one day of Sukkot happens in the autumn, you're good. So why did he say the 16th ema abri of Tishrei? Well, I did Tanaresha, Shisha Asar Lefnei Pesach, Tannaim Shisha Asar Lefnei Chag. They were just trying to compare Sukkot and Pesach. Because in the first statement of Rabbi Yossi, he said if the 16th of Nisan happens in the if the solstice, the equinox is on the 16th, you're going to have to push off another, right? Because that means the first day of Pesach on Tev B'Av, you were still in the previous season, right? That's why 16th is the equinox in the spring equinox. You have a problem because the first day of Pesach wasn't in, and really, it's not just about Pesach. It's because then you're going to end up with Sukkot being the 22nd is going to be the autumnal equinox, and that's going to create a problem. But once it said the 16th of Nisan, you have to intercalate the year, it wanted to tell you, but the 16th of Tishrei, you don't. But you don't have to also the 17th and the 18th and 19th. When it comes to Tishrei, you really only need one day of Sukkot to be, and then that's fine. And again, on that point, in this braita, he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda in theory. It's just they differ on that one day. Can the 21st be the equinox, or does the 20th have to be the equinox? Because Rabbi Yehuda thinks it's the 20th because he also thinks one day of Sukkot, but it has to be after the equinox, not on the equinox. Okay, next opinion. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Av Shisha Asar Lefnei Chag Ma'abri. So now Rabbi Shimon said the 16th, and we asked this question before. Hainu Tanakama. Isn't that the exact same thing as Tanakama? So for this, we're going to now turn to Amud Bet. So the difference between the 16th and the 16th is mentioned in two opinions in the braita is that one thinks the 16th, if it's on the equinox, it's fine. And one thinks the 16th has to be the day after the equinox because one thinks Yom Tekufa is the beginning. One thinks Yom Tekufa is the end. Again, the same differentiation between Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon is also the same differentiation between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. Now, remember, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, though, are of the opinion that you only need one day of Sukkot to be in the new season. And Rabbi Shimon and Tanakama think you need all the days starting from the second day of Sukkot. Not the first day, just the second day of Sukkot. Because again, that's the Chag HaAsif. It's the Chag where we gather, and the gathering has to be done in the new season, but not on Yom Tif when we don't gather anyway. So that's how we explain. Lo Masayim means we don't know who says what. Okay, we're going to differentiate. It's unclear from the language which one holds what, because they both say 16, have a bit of a different language the way they say it, but they both use that as their day. Just one thinks if it falls on the equinox, you're good, and one thinks if it falls on the equinox, you're not good. You have to wait one, right? It has to be one more day. The 16th has to be the day after the equinox. Acherim omrim miuto. Okay, now we're going to have a bunch of different interpretations of this miuto. V'kama miuto, arba asar yom. So remember, this one says the minority of the month can be in this summer. Only a minority can be in the summer. But the majority of the month has to be already in the autumn. Okay, whereas others said the majority can be, right? You basically have to get to right past the majority to be in the autumn. He says it's going to be like a difference of a day or two. So my kasavre, ikasavre yom tkufa gomer v'kule chag be'inan. If you're going to say maybe the acherim hold that the Yom Tekufa is the equinox, is the last day of the previous season, and you need all of Chag Sukkot to happen in the new season. That would make the most sense. Meaning, until now we've been saying it's all Chol HaMoed, right? Either the last day of Chol HaMoed or all the days of Chol HaMoed, or the last day of the holiday, or all the days of Chol HaMoed. Remember, the last day of Sukkot is not a holiday. Only Shmini Atzeret is. So, right, if it's Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Chol HaMoed, the 21st of Tishrei, you're fine because that's a day you could actually collect. Others say, miuto. Now, what this is basically saying is, even if the equinox is on the 14th of Tishrei, then we still have to push it off. Okay, this theoretically should be fine because then all of Sukkot is in the next season, and that's actually what the Gemara is going to say. So, my kasavre, what are they holding actually? Ikasavre yom tkufa gomer. If you think that the equinox is the last day of the previous season, and which right? Because you obviously don't think it's the new day of the next, because you definitely don't need the 14th to be in the autumn. V'kulei chag be'inan, and the whole holiday needs to be in the new season. Well, ha'ika, this actually works perfectly fine. You wouldn't need to do ibor, right? What they're saying is, even if only a minority of the month has passed, when the equinox comes, you're still going to need to add an extra year. Add an extra month. It's still not enough, but that doesn't make any sense because all of Sukkot is in the new season, no matter how you look at it. So that doesn't make any sense. So therefore, we're going to have some other options to explain. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Acherim b'tkufat Nisan kaimei. Oh, by the way, you thought they were talking about Tishrei like everybody else. Now remember, Rabbi Yossi specifically mentioned Nisan. Nobody else did. But now they're going to say, Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak thinks that Acherim are actually talking about Nisan. And what it's saying is this, Dichtiv, Shamor et Chodesh HaAviv. And that's why the 14th is important, because remember, the 14th you bring the Korban Pesach, even though both Sukkot and Pesach happen on the 15th of Tishrei, or 15th of Nisan, the 14th you already do the Korban Pesach. And that's the issue. Shamor aviv shel tkufa shehe b'chodesh Nisan. Okay, so basically you should make sure that the Chodesh HaAviv is entirely, in other words, meaning really the 14th Pesach should become in the new season. And that's why if the 14th is on the equinox, you have a problem. And it's the 14th of Nisan and not the 14th of Tishrei. But now the Gemara is going to ask, and it's either on this position of Acherim, or perhaps it's on, in general, all these opinions, which is, if you're off by a day, li'abre la'adar, why don't you just make Adar a full month? If you add one day to Adar, why add an entire month? If you're off by a day, okay, and let's just assume there's a question on Acherim. You're off by a day. You need the 14th to be in the new season, and the 14th is on the equinox. So just add one more day, 30 days to Adar instead of 29, and perfect. 14th will be in the spring. So Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, because of that explanation, they don't think that that's what this 14 means, and it's talking about Nisan and off by one day, so it wouldn't make sense to add a whole month. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, Tana milamala lamata kachashiv. Well, when they said 14, they mean from the end of the month you're counting back 14. V'hachi kamran, this is the way it should read. Ad miuto ma'abrim, v'kama miuto arba'asar yom. In other words, up to a minority of the month, you have to be ma'aber, and then we're back to saying it's the 16th of the month. And then we're 15th of the month, right? You need to go back 14 days, and then you end up on the 15th, and then that would be the opinion of Acherim. Ravina, and then that would be Nisan. That would be saying, okay, what it's really saying here is they stick with it, it's Nisan, and they're basically saying, as long as your 14 days, which gets you to day 16, is in the equinox, you're good, because you can always push off one day, right? But as long as you're at day 16 and you're in the new cycle, right? You're already in spring, then you're good to go. Okay. I just want to check one thing, right? Right, ma'abrim. What they're saying is if Tkufa Nisan falls on the 16th, then you have to add a whole new month. But if it's only 14, then you don't have to worry, because as long as you push it off one day, you're good, and you can fix that in Adar. That's one answer. And the other answer, which is going to end this whole complicated section, is Ravina Amar La'olam Acherim B'Tishrei Kaimei. No, they really are talking about Tishrei. Because and really we're talking about 14 days. So what do they hold? Kasavre Acherim Hule Chag B'inan V'Yom Tov Rishon. Now we're going to say, they say that you need the entire holiday of Sukkot. We didn't really see this before. Everyone said 16, we start on Chol HaMoed. This opinion holds 14. Why 14? Because you want the 15th already to be in the new season, and because the entire holiday of Sukkot has to be in the new season, to which they question, Yom Tov Rishon, Chag Asif K'tiv, but it says Chag Asif, the holiday of gathering. We're talking about gathering. It has to be only a day that you can gather and not on Yom Tov. Well, Chag Haba B'Zman HaSefa. No. And the way probably you would have read that pasuk is Chag Asif is the holiday of Sukkot, starting even from day one. It's just, you might not be picking, gathering on day one, because that's work in the field you don't do on Chag, but it obviously means the entire holiday. So we basically saw a range of opinions. Again, I want to try to quickly summarize without going into all the nitty-gritty details. But we started with the statement of Shmuel, who quoted Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda in a very different way than they were quoted in the Tannaitic sources. We brought two braita that contradicted, one that seemed to have Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda saying opposite things, or at least somewhat different things. And we had the braita that seemed to say that one thinks the equinox is the last day of the previous season, and the other one thinks it's the first day, and they don't seem to disagree about that according to Shmuel either. So we had a bit of a problem. Then we went into, and the basic difference, whether you say 16 or 21, has to do with does starting from the second day of Chol HaMoed and the whole holiday have to be in the autumn, or does just one day of Sukkot have to be in autumn, which could be Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Sukkot. And then we saw 5 different opinions in the braita, which we kind of really split up somewhat into 2, or I would say 3 opinions. Okay. One opinion was the Tannaim Rabbi Shimon approach, which is 16, and that really you need the whole month of the whole holiday of Sukkot starting from the 16th in the new season. And the debate between them was, well, can that be on the day of the equinox, or does it have to be the day after the equinox because it's Yom Tekufa Gomer or Matchil? Then, if we start with Acherim here, Acherim come and say you need the whole holiday, at least according to Ravina. We'll explain it like that because that's the simplest way. You need the whole holiday of Sukkot, including the first day. And therefore, the equinox has to happen on day 14, so that day 15 can already be in the new season. So that's saying that you need the whole holiday, and then we just mean the entire, or just starting from second day of Chol HaMoed. And then you have the Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi approach, which is, again, it was a little complicated, the language of Rabbi Yossi, because he was talking about Pesach, but really Pesach affected Tishrei. And what he said about Tishrei really didn't mean exactly what it sounded like it meant. But both of them really hold the end of the holiday. Only one day of the holiday needs to be in Sukkot, and then again, needs to be in the autumn. And then the debate between them was just, again, can the equinox be on the last day, according to Rabbi Yossi, because that's the day that's the beginning of the season. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the equinox had to be the day before the last day because you needed one day in Sukkot, and he thinks Yom Tekufa is part of the previous season. So that's a good, simple summary of a bit of a quite complicated sugya. Okay, we're now going to continue with much easier stuff. Moving now to the next issue in the Mishnah. Remember, we were listing how many judges do you need to appear in front of for the following issues. So smicha zakenim. If you remember, we said smicha zakenim likely means the smicha that the zakenim, the elders, do on the animal when there's a par helim davar shel tzibor. This is when the community, the Sanhedrin or the rabbis teach a mistaken halacha. The people follow it. They have to bring a special sacrifice to atone. And then the elders go and do smicha. They put their weight on the animal. So Tana Rabbanan, v'samchu ziknei, yachol ziknei hashuk. So when it says ziknei, okay, this is the pasuk it says. The pasuk when it's describing in Vayikra Daled Tefaf, v'samchu ziknei ha'ida et yidehem al shapal. So the elders of the community go and put their hands on the head of the bull, lifnei Hashem, before God, okay, etc. So we're going to darshan this pasuk. Samchu ziknei. So the braita says, Yachol ziknei ashuk. Maybe this just means elders, not necessarily judges or specialists in halacha. Talmud lomar eda. Well, it says eda. So ziknei eda are generally the judges and the wise, the special people in the community. I eda yachol ktanei eda. Just because it says eda, maybe it means the smaller and less important people. Talmud lomar ha'eda. The community, the elders of the community. That means the important ones. Miyuchadim shebe'eda, the special ones in the Eda. V'kamahen, how many do you need? And where do we get this from the pasuk? So we're now going to see there's a machloka, which we saw before. V'samchu shnayim, ziknei shnayim, ein beitin shakum, osifim aleim od echad. So we have samchu is plural, zknei is plural, so that's 2, you get to 4. Then you can't have an even number, so we get to 5. That's divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon omer, ziknei shnayim, ve'en beitin shakum, osifim aleim od echad. Rabbi Shimon doesn't darshan samchu. He just darshans kenei. How many people? It's kenei, plural, that's 2. You need one more to have it not even. That's how we get to 3. But Rabbi Shimon haktiv samchu. What does he do with samchu? Why doesn't he darshan that? The gufe says you need that to just tell you that you have to do smicha. How else would you know you have to do smicha? You have to put your weight on the animal. You wouldn't know that if you didn't have the word of samchu. Now we're going to have a ping pong between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, and each one's going to say, why doesn't he darshan the way the other one does? So why does Rabbi Yehuda darshan v'samchu as another 2, and doesn't say, oh, that's just there because you need it in the pasuk? Well, Rabbi Yehuda legufe lo tzarich says you don't need that. De'im ken, delo ate v'samchu lidrasha lichtov ziknei da'idehem of Rosh Hapar. It could have just said, the elders, their hands on the bull's head. You need to be. put pressure with their hands on the, everyone would know it means smicha. Okay, in a minute we're going to say why. It doesn't say smicha, you're missing the verb, right? But because it says the hands on the head of the bull, it seems pretty obvious what else they can do with their hands if not, right? Hands on the head of the bull means hands on the head of the bull, it means smicha. So you don't need the word smicha for that. That's why it's for darshan. Rabbi Shimon doesn't read it this way. Why not? Rabbi Shimon, iktiv hachi havamina mai al besamuch. You might have thought that on doesn't mean on, it means next to. So maybe they just need to put their hands next to the head of the bull and not on the head of the bull. And that's why you need the word smicha for itself, which means it's not darshan to say two more judges, and that's why he only has three. For Rabbi Yehuda, why does Rabbi Yehuda say you really don't need that, even though al could have been next to? Because he says we have Xera Shava, meaning, Kamar Rosh Me'ola, but the Korban Ola, it says you put your hands on the head of the animal. And here it says hands on the head of the bull. Hands on the head of the bull could have easily taught you smicha without the word v'samchu. Because of the Xera Shava, because we learn Rosh appears there, Rosh appears there. What's true about Rosh there must be true about Rosh here. And therefore, you didn't really need the word smicha. Rabbi Shimon, what about him? Why doesn't he hold by this Xera Shava? Rabbi Shimon lo gamer Rosh Me'ola. He doesn't have that Xera Shava. If you remember, Xera Shavas are learned by tradition. It's not a tradition. There's a Xera Shava there. Tana, another braita now about smicha. Smicha usmichatz kenim b'shlosha. Now they say smicha and smicha of zakenim is for three. Now what's smicha and what's smichatz kenim? My smichatz kenim. Now you might remember when we learned the Mishnah, we said smicha could be referring either to the bull offering or it could be referring to smicha, what we call smicha nowadays, that a rabbi gets smicha and becomes authorized to rule and judge and teach and all that. So my smichatz kenim. So this braita actually has both. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan mismach sabe. Smicha means to give the smichatz kenim. Okay, in other words, one means the smicha on the animal, and one means the smicha for the rabbis to get smicha. And that needs to be done in front of three. Minalan, how do we get that you need to do smicha in front of three? And here we're going to actually raise a problem. Well, if you're going to learn it from Moshe, he does smicha onto Yoshua. So there it sounds like one person, right? You wouldn't need three. Right? It should be enough to just have one. Maybe you say, well, Moshe was in the place of 71, right? Because he kind of was in charge of all 71, and maybe he had the power like 71. Well, then it shouldn't be good done in three. We're going to learn from Moshe. Either we're going to learn from Moshe 1, or we're going to learn 71. We're not going to get to 3 from Moshe. So, kasha, this is in fact difficult. So they don't have a good answer for where we get 3 from. Now they're going to say, biyada mamash samchin alei. So, biyada mamash samchin alei. So they say, Rav Acha says to Rav Ashi, I think it's a question actually, biyada mamash samchin alei, do you need to do it actually with your hands? To which Amarle, samchin alei b'shma. No, you don't do smicha with your hands. Okay, even though it does sound like Moshe did that, and I assume that's what begged the question. Do you have to do it with your hands? No, you don't have to do it with your hands, like on the animal, right? You don't do that. But it just means you do it in name. Okay, you give him authority. You call him Rebbe. This is why all the rabbis in Israel are called Rebbe, and in Babylonia they're not, because in Babylonia they didn't have the power to give smicha. And one of the big differences is that you can't don dine knasot. Knasot are only for people who have smicha, fines, penalties, all those things that are in the category of knas, we discussed in the beginning of the Masechet, those you can't do. Now they're going to go back to the issue of chad. Chad lo samich, really one person can't do smicha. V'ha'amar Rabbi Yehuda amarav, beram zachor toa ish l'tov. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Shmo. We're now going to hear a long story, though we're going to have to wait till tomorrow, about Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava and how he gave smicha to rabbis. Okay, there was a crazy story here. And umalehu nishakhu dinei knasot Yisrael. If it weren't for him, there would have been no rabbis left anymore with smicha if he hadn't given smicha to all these rabbis. And we're going to see the story of what he did. And therefore, we're going to say, okay, we're going to have to figure out what exactly this is. So we're going to stop here. But the main thing we're going to be left with is, how do you know you can't do it with one? He, in fact, did it with one. Forget about learning from Moshe. Maybe Moshe was different. But we have a case where one rabbi gave smicha, and we're going to have to figure out what the story is. So if we review today's daf already, the first part I reviewed about all the different opinions about how we calculate the tkufa, what it means. What is the issue about the equinox? What date is the equinox supposed to come out on, right? That will either tell us you have to add a month or not have to add a month. And it really has to do mainly, even though a little bit with Pesach, we saw mainly it has to do, which is funny because we always think it's Chag HaAviv, but really it has to do with the holiday of Sukkot. Okay, because even if Pesach ends up in the Aviv, and that's what we saw with this Rabbi Yossi opinion, you could still have Sukkot being in the summer, and we don't want to have that. So it's not just Pesach, you also have to consider Sukkot. And the question is, what are the dates? And is it all of Sukkot, part of Sukkot, right? Or the from Chol HaMoed, or just one day of Chol HaMoed? And then also, is the equinox the day, the beginning of the new season or the end of the last season? And that also obviously affects what your opinion is about these topics. Those are the main machlokot there. Then we got to smicha tzikenim, where we tried to learn where we get 5, where we get 3. We saw the different opinions about how to darshan apasuk. Is samchu part of the drasha, or is it needed for itself? And then we had that smicha also could be smicha, right? And according to the braita, also, smicha is down before 3, which we raise a problem. It doesn't really make sense that smicha of smicha of making someone into a rabbi should have to be in front of 3. And in fact, we're in the middle of a question right now, which seems to indicate that one rabbi gave smicha. So it really raises a big question on that braita that said it's not just smichat's kinim on the sacrifice, it's also smicha of turning people into rabbis. And we learned the differences between smicha and what happens with a rabbi doesn't have smicha, could still be a rabbi and teach, but certain things they're limited in, and they're not called Rebbe, and that's why the Amoraim in Babylonia are all called Rav, and the ones in Israel are called Rebbe, because smicha continued, and that was just a political thing. At a certain point, they said only in Israel can you give smicha. It was again one of those power battles between the Babylonians and the Eretz Israel rabbis trying to assert their authority, and basically the rabbis in Israel set that only in Israel can you give smicha. They no longer allowed Babylonian rabbis to give smicha, and that's why all the rabbis in the Babylonian Talmud, except for the ones who were quoted from Israel, are called Rav rather than Rebbe. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day and Chanukah Sameach.